Good morning. I am here this morning with Pete Nord, who is a play therapist, CBT practitioner, and he's got a lot of other tools and techniques that he uses to help children. And we're doing a live from Star Jumps virtually to show you how you can use an activity to help support a child with anxiety. My name's Jo Brett. I'm the CEO at Star Jumps and I'm an occupational therapist. And I'm really delighted to welcome Pete to show us how you can use a simple activity. You just need paper and some pens or colouring. And I'm going to be a 7-year-old. I'm not going to have a 7-year-old's voice, but I'm going to be a 7-year-old for this. Yeah. And so I'm doing a session, just a simple activity with Pete. And so I'll hand over to Pete. And I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about yourself before we start, Pete, but we're really lucky to have Pete working with us at Star Jumps. And he's also able to do online sessions like the one we're going to do now. So, and support parents with some counselling skills as well, if they're finding some of the issues their child might be having right now, or particularly in this particular time while we're in this period, challenging. So, Pete, over to you.
Good morning, Jo. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to see you, virtual.
Yes.
So, my name is Pete Nord, and I'm a play therapist and CBT practitioner. I have a background in teaching originally. And then I discovered that I really like to work with children therapeutically. And I've done some play therapy training, some counseling training, and now I'm almost complete with a full CBT qualification on the 22nd of May.
That's
yes. So really today is I want to give parents an opportunity to see how a play therapist with a CBT twist, can help children and really themselves to see anxiety in a different way. Because anxiety is a stuck, inflexible state of mind where we think and feel that there's a threat to ourselves. And that makes the brain go into hyperdrive. It does all kinds of weird things, stress, and you can't think straight and you feel really locked into your own head. And if we adopt a more concerning attitude by looking at a bit of CBT, in particular REBT, then we find a different and more flexible way. So that's really what I want to show our parents today.
Thank you, Pete. Shall we make a start?
Let's do that. Are you ready?
I'm ready, yes.
Great. Okay. So just take a moment to center yourself, to find just a bit of calm. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds for that.
Okay. Yes.
So I want you to think about the last time that you got worried.
Okay.
Really feel that, because we are going to explore what that means for you.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you to make a monster, draw a monster that would represent what you are feeling when you get anxious.
Okay. I'm going to show you my paper so I can draw my monster.
And it might be a good idea, Jo, if you think as you draw about the name of this monster.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. So when you look at this monster that feels the anxiety that you feel, right?
Yeah.
Do you think you can come up with a name for this monster that you've just drawn?
Mr. Worry Monster.
Great. So if you want to write Mr. Worry Monster on the piece of paper, that would be great as well.
Mm.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to give you a set of questions, and I want you to answer all of those questions by drawing with a different colored pen.
Okay.
So if you have all your pens ready, we can continue.
Yes.
Great. The first question I'm going to ask you, Joe, is can you show me on this monster where he feels the anxiety in his body? Wow. And when I look, maybe you can turn that around so I can maybe
Yes.
just make a comment or two.
Can you see that?
Yes, I can. So when I look at your monster, Mr. Worry Monster, am I right to say that there are two important things that your monster feels?
It's a few things, I think.
Mm-hmm. And what can you see when you look at your monster? What is really showing up for you?
Feels like the head is exploding, feeling really fuzzy and messy.
Yes.
And the heart is going very fast, and it feels a bit tight in the chest, and the
Yes.
tummy feels uncomfortable.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, that is often how we feel when we get anxious, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Now,
and a bit of kind of in the clenchy teethy.
right. Yes. Yes. That's common symptoms when we look at anxiety, by the way.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Okay. Now, you can turn your paper around because we are going to go to the next question.
Okay.
So, the next step is with a different color. I want you to show me on Mr. Worry the monster. I want to show you, or you want to show me, what does your worry monster think? What is going on in his head? If you cannot draw that, you can say what's going on for your monster.
Okay. Feeling like either running away or speeding up. with
Yes.
things, because there's so many things in the monster's head that can't think straight,
Yes.
or wants to run away and hide away,
Yes.
feels a bit sick and spiky.
Yes. Yes. Would it be okay if I say that you feel, or your monster rather, your monster feels on edge?
Yes, draw an edge.
Yes. Good.
Wants to run away or
Yeah.
lash out with the tail, hit something.
Yes. So think about your monster now, and by looking at your monster, I want you to really think, when your monster feels all this anxiety in his body, in his mind, in every cell in his body, what is the one thing your monster wants to do most when he feels this anxiety?
Feel better.
Aha. So he wants to feel better. Great. Now, I'm going to ask you to park that idea. Maybe you can make some sort of symbol, maybe a little triangle somewhere on your page, because that can remind us to come back to that thought, and we can talk about that in a short while. Would that be okay?
A triangle.
Yes.
Is this a triangle for the want to feel better?
Yes, because we will be looking at that at the end of the session, okay?
Okay.
A different color, if you can. When your monster, Mr. Worry, when he gets anxious, can you describe what kind of behaviors your monster does regularly under these conditions of anxiety?
Get shouty.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Be rude to my mum and dad.
Yes.
And maybe push my sister
Yes.
and my brother,
Mm-hmm.
even a school friend if they annoyed me.
Yeah. So, Joe,
yeah,
isn't it interesting when you have said those words that the monster becomes pushy and angry, that originally your monster felt anxiety, but
yes,
that morphed into something.
yes, turned into being angry and
Yeah,
shouty and pushy and
yes,
lashing out.
that's right. And in REBT and CBT, we call that a meta emotion. So you start off with an emotion of anxiety, and it's almost like it's an onion, and it unveils other emotions that is locked. Does
Yes,
that make sense to you?
yes, it does.
Great.
I've
Now,
thought of some other things I feel, or the
yes.
monster feels when he's worried. Like
Would
if
you
he's
like?
worried about doing a spelling test
Yes.
and worried about getting it wrong
Yes.
and feeling ashamed if I haven't got 10 out of 10 because I want it to be perfect.
That's right.
And then I feel really ashamed and stupid, and then I get angry about that. And then I might start to get more angry and frustrated,
Yes.
and then I'd be angry with other people when it wasn't really to do with them.
And I have a question for you. When you sit back and you look at all that angriness that came out of your monster, right?
Yeah.
When that shame and guilt comes over you,
Mm.
how does that make you feel as this monster?
Sad and a failure and rubbish.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Thank you
like I
for
don't want to try anymore.
yes. You want to give up.
Give up. I hate spellings. I'm not
Yes.
going to try them anymore. I'm going to never do spellings again, ever.
Yes. Yes. So you start off being an anxious monster and you end up being an angry monster, and then the angry monster turns into some monster with guilt.
And who feels sad? So I'm going to.
And sad. Yes. Lots of crying. Am I
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for that. You've been very brave showing us, what happens to your monster. But I have good news, Joe.
Good.
Would you like to hear my good news?
I would.
Okay. Now, and remind me, why did you draw that triangle? For what reason?
You asked me to draw something to at the bottom of it all. I want to feel better.
Right. Okay. Now, I want to really ask you now to be very brave. And we are going to look at ways of how you can help your monster to feel cool concern rather than anxious anxiety. What does that sound like?
Sounds like it would be a good idea
Okay.
and
Now,
help me.
right. Now I want you to breathe.
Okay.
Just make sure you feel like you are breathing well. Your feet are, touching the floor. You feel centered. Just take this moment in. I'll do this with you. In with your nose and out with your mouth. How calm do you feel if you would say, on a scale from 0 to 10? How calm do you feel now?
About a 4.
Okay. And at the start of this activity, how calm did you feel from a 0 to a 10?
8 or 9.
Okay. And who has made that change happen?
Doing the breathing and talking about that there are ways to feel better is making me feel more calm.
So you are taking responsibility for your own feelings, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you now to really give your brain a chance to come up with ideas of how your Mr. Worry Monster can actually make himself even more relaxed.
Okay.
See what happens in your mind. Just let it go, because it will come up with ideas naturally.
Okay. Do you want me to tell you what I'm thinking?
Would you mind?
Oh. So sometimes if I feel I'm starting to get worried, I will, or I could be thinking about what I'm thinking and decide I've got to stop for a minute and maybe
Yes.
take a few breaths and think about what to do better, to maybe think of something else to take my mind off the worry, like something
Yes.
I enjoy, going for a walk or doing some drawing or listening to some nice music. And maybe if I'm worried, try and think, I don't need to keep thinking about the worry and thinking about what's going on in my head. I could use breathing to calm my body down, and then try some other things that might help me to calm down.
Great. So, if I've heard correctly, your monster knows about stuff that he can do when he feels anxious.
Yes.
And if I can recall correctly, you said three things. You said your monster can breathe, right?
Yep.
Your monster can draw to keep, the focus on something else than the anxiety. And what was the third thing you came up with?
Doing something physical, like going for a walk or rolling over my bouncy ball in the living room, or playing on the trampoline, doing some jumping.
That is really fantastic news, because that is really hopeful. Because when you are feeling that this anxiety monster can only feel anxious, is that really the truth?
No, I can change it.
Right. And who has the ability to change this anxiety, anxious anxiety, into cool concern?
Me.
There you go. And I think, Joe, what is important here is, you know, our children, especially in this lockdown, you know, all our lives have changed so dramatically. And children often feel anxiety, but it comes out in different ways, whether that's anger or self-pity or, shameful because their behavior wasn't that great. But it starts off with anxiety. And if we become aware of that, we can introduce an activity like we've demonstrated today. It's a simple activity, but the benefit for our children, it's massive. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, it is. And it can just be all consuming and completely overwhelming. And for some children, the anger and the anxiety can become a complete meltdown, and it can affect self-esteem so much. And then things become harder and harder, and behaviors can become more and more entrenched. And difficult to change.
That's right.
Yeah.
And, when you've said all of those things, I'm just thinking about, occupational health, occupational
Occupational
therapy.
therapy. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry to correct you.
Yeah, that's right. I'm clearly not an OT, but we tend to fall into routines in our heads, and that
Yes.
becomes our new norms.
Yes.
And if we break that cycle, there's flexibility to change into the better self, the
Yes.
one I choose to be.
Yes. Understanding that you have a choice in how you respond to things is so important, and a choice about what you focus your thoughts on.
That's right.
And I think when
Yes.
children start to realize they've got those choices and have self-awareness, and to understand if they've got a tummy ache, it might be because they're worried about something, or
That's right. That's right.
more self-awareness is really, really helpful.
I always, especially with my adult clients, I always say, all these behaviors that you feel in your body, it's almost like a pain system. When you
Yes.
hit your toe, you will feel pain, right?
Yes.
And it's the pain that is the alert system letting you know that something is wrong.
Yeah, it's your survival mechanism.
Right. So if you are
Protect.
aware of these things in your body and your mind, you can always be sure that behind that is an emotion, and it's probably anxiety.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
And
you very much.
we just had Tonya, who is an occupational therapist who's watching us, has said that she feels that for her child, calling the drawing a monster is something she's quite scared about. So she would sort of call it an inner worry monster, if that makes sense. Or maybe there's another word for monster.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
Yes.
For some children, the word monster, would be inappropriate. But that could be
Yes.
changed into, for some girls, they might come up with a fairy. It could be a fairy, but this fairy just has a bad day.
Yes.
So, that could be
Yeah.
that. Or for often with boys, we could actually think of designing a car, and the car also feels the anxiety in its engine.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it's really about how flexible you are, but knowing your child and what works for him or her. I think that's important. Yeah.
In occupational therapy, we have a program called How Does Your Engine Run? Which is an analogy for how is your body running?
Yes.
And what do you need to do to help it slow down if it needs to slow down, and sometimes in some cases go faster, but in this instance to slow down. And all of this relates to the nervous system in the body, and the calm. We're trying to engage what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the where things like breathing comes in, the rest and relaxation part of the nervous system, rather than the sympathetic, which can be triggered with the fight, flight, freeze response. And what you're talking about, Pete, as well, is the rewiring of the neurons in the brain, so that we're more used to doing these things that can switch us from feeling one thing to another, and being aware of how to do that. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes and habitual. Whereas if you're still doing the other things, that becomes a habit. And so this is a great great tool to use to help with that. And I presume, Pete, as well, I know, don't presume, but I know that in your therapy you would use lots of other sorts of activities. Could you touch on a few different play activities you might use around this theme as well, for example?
Yes, let me think. So as a play therapist, we use different modalities. We use a bit of sand play, where we use figurines and artifacts to play in the sand. And that then, becomes a symbol of what is going on or representation of what's going on for the client in his head. So once again, taking what's in here and projecting it on something else, because that seems to be really helping children distance themselves from any guilt or shame, because guilt and shame is a real problem for children.
Absolutely. Somebody's just made a comment here about a son who is struggling with anxiety in the past, but recently begun to struggle and notice this is affecting everything, even being in the garden, hypersensitive to loud noises in the distance, for example, plane going overhead, worrying that it might, be about to drop some bombs, feeling like something bad's going to happen, affecting sleep and mood. Exercise seems really good. And the person who's asked this is saying, if as a parent you can't deliver this kind of therapy or these kind of tools yourself, how can they get that kind of help?
Right. That is a good question, because often with these things, it is very helpful to seek professional help, right? If that is not possible, I have what I call the 3-tiered system. And if parents or anybody else, if you use this 3-tiered system, I can't guarantee that everything will be okay, but I've seen it so much in clinical practice when I talk to parents, psychoeducating them about their children's emotional well-being, that it really tends to work. I want to say 90% of the time. Would you like me to share that with you?
Yes, please.
Okay. So it always goes step 1, step 2, step 3. And when you cannot skip a step, because if you do that, but you will see if I explain it. So the first step is de-escalate. So the first thing you do is, if you can, de-escalate the situation. So for that mother, whose child is now hypersensitive and the noise has become too loud, is it possible to take that child into a calmer environment, for example? That could be, earphones. Right, let's put some soft classical music on. Or it could be, let's go to a quiet room. Let's build a hut with pieces of material, and the child can go in there, under, so that there's a sense of safety. So there are things. Be creative here, right?
Can I just mention, Pete, Anya and I recently did a Facebook Live on calming the nervous system with sensory processing sort of strategies and movement, because sometimes if a child is really very heightened in their state, very anxious, you can't really talk to them and necessarily do an activity like this. You might need to, like Pete did at the start, he got me to just take a moment, but your child might need to take more than a moment to really be able to to help their body to feel calmer, so that then they can engage the thinking part of the brain. Because when we're very heightened,
Yes.
our higher level language processing and thinking and reasoning, you can't access those parts of the brain when you're in having a meltdown or you're very, very upset.
That's
so
right.
that de-escalation, that calming is very critical, isn't it, Pete?
Yes. And before I forget, something that I really recommend is physical touch.
Yes.
That really helps, because it's almost like, if the mother or the father touches and hugs the child, it gives them the sense of, I can now give that worry to that person because I don't have to be in charge.
Deep touch pressure, it is part of the sensory system that is very calming. And
Yes.
just a small comment on that is sometimes light touch, so if you touch your child lightly, that might be more triggering for some children, for example, with autism, than having
Yes.
a really nice firm
That's right.
hug, or using some heavy blankets or something to help them snuggle into.
Yes. So I think what we are both saying is, being aware of what works for your child. I think that
Yes,
is key.
absolutely.
The second thing you can do, or the second step, is acknowledge. As adults, how many times have we felt that somebody hasn't listened to what we are saying, right? And unless we feel that somebody is acknowledging our presence and our thoughts and our being and our and the way we are, we can't move on. The same with children. So for that mother that has a child that finds noises, too stimulating, for example, have that conversation after the de-escalating process and say things like, I can see that you are not feeling yourself. I can see that you are feeling something else than calm. Because that then helps that child to access that part of the brain, the language part. And by doing that, you're actually giving the child the opportunity to process what's going on for him or her. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what was the last statement you said? I can see that you're feeling, you said not feeling yourself. And the second statement, I'm typing it in.
I can see, what did I say? I can see that you are not feeling calm.
See that you are.
And you would have, hopefully you've seen how I've done this now. Instead of saying the emotion myself, I give the child the opportunity to own that emotion.
Could you say, I can see that you're feeling uncomfortable?
Absolutely. But therapeutically, if I would have said, I can see that you're feeling anxious, what is the learning that the child receives?
They'll think
no learning.
Yeah, I'm always anxious.
Yes.
And I wonder if for some children using the word calm, they may associate that maybe sometimes with not being calm. Whereas if you link it to discomfort, or don't know if that makes a difference.
Once again, it's the child, it's child-led. For some children, I found that if they don't really use words and language, is to mimic what their body is showing me. So, for example, if they're anxious, I would do the following, and I will demonstrate it, and hopefully you can see this. I would say, I can see that you're feeling.
Yes, yeah, that's lovely.
because the child knows what they are feeling. It's acknowledging what they are feeling. And the last step is, so it's de-escalation, it's acknowledgement. And the last step is alternative.
Yeah.
What are we introducing? What are we saying? What are we giving a script for the child to change?
Yes.
So it might be something like this. So earlier this morning, I saw you not being yourself. And the child would say, yes, I felt really angry at the world. I felt angry at the coronavirus. I can't see my friends. And then, of course, you acknowledge that, which is step 2. And then I say, okay, how helpful was these things that you felt? And the child might say, oh, it isn't helpful. I just got angry. And now I help the child to discover, are there any alternative ways of behaving? And children, when they become rational again in their heads, they are excellent at coming up with things that they can change, because they really know what they felt. They own it.
Yes.
We might feel guilty of bringing it up for them, but it's not what you say, but how you say it that is important here. Because unless you own that emotion, how can we move on? You can't. You're stuck. You're stuck. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I think that's lovely. And so when can I just go over with you? You asked the child how helpful were these feelings that you felt.
Yes.
Then your response to that is?
So how helpful were these feelings? And what do you think you can do differently?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to type that in.
Oh. What
can
you do differently to make you feel happy, content? And once again, the language could be different for every child.
Yeah.
They know what they want to feel.
Yeah.
And I bet you they really don't want to feel angry and anxious. Nobody does.
No. And at the same time, it's I guess it's important to acknowledge, because you talked about cool concern, that it is normal to feel worry. It's a normal human response, protective and survival response.
That's right.
But it's knowing that you can help to feel different if you do things differently.
That's right. And in CBT, we know that if we change our behavior, that changes our feelings, and our feelings that change eventually change the emotion.
Yes.
Shall I give an example?
Yes, that'd be good.
Imagine that there's a 10-year-old boy being very anxious at riding a bike. So the emotion is anxiety, right?
Yes.
Now, you encourage the child and you say, okay, I think you can do it. Have a go. Have a try. They get on and they have maybe 1 second on that bike before it falls over. And they get on that bike again. And now it becomes 2 seconds. If the child would have done exactly the same thing as what the anxiety told him to do, he wouldn't have gone on the bike.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So by changing the behavior, going against what the anxiety is telling you to do, you end up with creating concern. Concern is good. You don't want to break your leg riding a bike.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a far better mental state of mind because it's flexible.
And you're open to learning.
There you go. Because you might fall again and you might, scratch your arm and it might bleed, but yet you are going back on the bike.
Yes.
It's really changing the default position that we go into when we feel anxious. In CBT,
which is quite fixed, isn't it?
Yes. For adults, we call it the duvet dive.
The what? The duvet dive.
So when you feel anxious, what do we tend to do as adults?
Yes.
We go to our room, we switch the lights off. It's comfortable, it's cozy, there's no anxiety present. And for the present, for that time, it feels great. But the anxiety, the problem is still not sorted out.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But if you say that you are concerned about this or that, it makes you act in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's powerful because
yes.
we have the emotional capacity for changing. We have it.
Yeah.
But do we utilize it enough? That's another question.
Absolutely. So this is really applicable for adults too. Somebody's just commented that their son won't get back on the bike and he gets angry that he can't do it. So for some children, it might be needing to practice some of the other skills that will help the bike be easier. I don't know if that's correct or appropriate in this instance.
Yeah.
But sometimes for some children, it does take just really little tiny steps to be able to get back on the bike. Maybe it's just, okay, I'm just going to hold the handlebars and wheel it round. Now I'm going to put that kind of thing. But
and using our minds and say, okay, and have that conversation. Can you see yourself riding your bikes with your 4 friends in the forest? You're planting the seed.
Yeah.
And that is called rational emotive imagery. We plant the seed here, and from that seed, a tree will eventually grow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's very powerful what this machine can do.
Incredibly. And it's very easy to just carry on in life and get busy doing things and not really think about what's going on up here and how we can change how we feel.
That's right.
By being aware and aware of the impact of it on ourselves. I know for myself, if I'm feeling anxious sometimes or stressed, I will tend to do more, be busier, work longer hours rather than do a duvet dive. And that's not helpful. So it's the self-care, it's the being aware of what you're doing, and then breathe and take the time to go for a walk. Someone said walking in nature is lovely, and there are so many things. And we've got lots of ideas from other people in the team on our Facebook page over these past few weeks where we've been talking about anxiety. And it's a really big subject, but I think it's been really lovely to do something practical today to demonstrate a process that people can use with children and themselves to move away.
To be honest, I I do this sometimes myself because I need to put the brakes on
Mm,
because life is so incredibly busy. And now
absolutely.
we are not necessarily busy working all the time, but we are busy being anxious about corona all the time. It's still work. Our brain is literally working 24/7 trying to mitigate what might happen next.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And just going back to the bike,
Yeah.
um, so the the not getting back on the bike, sometimes I would say, you know, if it's got to the point where just can't think you can do that anymore, then maybe, would you say, Pete, have a break from doing that activity and try and build up self-esteem and success in other activities?
Absolutely. Because
Because
the skill is transferable. The skill
yes,
is self-confidence.
self-confidence, feeling you can do things and not being afraid of failure.
Yes.
You need to
Yes.
hardwire that more.
Oh, yes. And
Yes,
and especially in the now, when I
absolutely.
work with children in schools, I often tell the parents, what are you doing in the house to build that self-esteem? It's okay for children to have little tasks in the house because every time that they are actually helping out, maybe folding the socks, putting them away, they are
Folding.
learning. Yeah,
You
but they
fold
are
your
learning
socks.
the skills,
Oh,
you know?
put them in a ball.
Yes. And it's something that they can see in front of them. They've done it. Wow, it's a pat on the back. Well done. You have done something. You've made a contribution.
And sometimes it's commenting when they're just sitting quietly, perhaps doing some drawing or playing beautifully with a sibling,
Yeah.
to remember to go over and give some really positive feedback on what they're doing so well,
Yes.
because it fills up their bucket, as people would
That's
say,
right.
doesn't it? And then there's more hope of being able to try things which are trickier. And I
Yeah.
think probably a bike right now might be something all the family would like to be doing together. So it
Yes.
must be, I can understand the frustration,
Yeah.
or not the frustration, but the desire for a child to be able to join in and enjoy that activity.
Yes.
But there may be a bit of other things that to help get to that point that could really move it forward.
A
So
flexible way of sorting that out. Sorry for interrupting you.
I
Is, get those little support wheels for the bike.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yep.
Flexibility is key.
Yeah, thinking around it. And
Yeah.
there's so much more we could talk about, Pete. I think it would be lovely at some point, not too far away, to do another activity like this, perhaps,
I would be
to
delighted.
demonstrate, something that could be really helpful for people at home,
Yeah,
and for adults as well as children, because I know you also work with adults. So
I do.
we could also demonstrate that potentially as well. So I think we've gone to nearly an hour, and
Yeah.
so it's probably time to say goodbye now. I really want to thank you for that session, and for everybody watching, and for anyone who watches after this live. It's lovely to have the interaction, and I hope you'll find this really helpful, because I think Pete has shared some really, really great information here, and I'd really like to thank you for that, Pete. Oh, and just to
My
mention, we've
pleasure.
got Liz Van Gran, our lead speech and language therapist, speaking tonight at 8 o'clock on talking to children with anxiety and how to talk to children with anxiety, especially if they've got social communication and speech and language difficulties. And she's going to give some tips and tools for how to do that, and an opportunity to ask some questions as well. And we've got a wealth of other people on our Star Jumps page who've recently been talking about anxiety and in terms of nutrition from a paediatrician's perspective in relation to autism and ADHD. And now we've got something, thank you very much, from Pete.
Oh, thank you very much, and hope to see you soon.
Yes, I've enjoyed it. Thanks very much, Pete. Bye-bye, everybody.
No problem. Cheerio. Bye.
Bye.